Hello and welcome to Sustainable City Network's presentation of a webcast that will explain how the City of Arlington, Texas efficiently reports disaster information to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and how software provided by Cartograph helps streamline that process. My name is Dick McGrain with Sustainable City Network, publishers of the online trade magazine scitynetwork.com. Along with the webinars like the one you're viewing today, we also produce email newsletters, a quarterly print magazine, conferences, and other interactive content specifically designed for civic leaders and professionals involved in the day-to-day challenge of building sustainable communities. We reach readers in all 50 states and throughout Canada with quality and timely information on sustainability best practices, products, and services. We're thrilled that more than 350 readers across North America have registered for today's presentation, which is sponsored by Cartograph, a leading provider of flexible, integrated technology to public sector agencies seeking efficiency, accountability, and transparency. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's webcast. Scott DeGrant brings 20-plus years of industry experience to the City of Arlington, Texas Parks and Recreation Department, where he's currently the Asset System Administrator. Prior to his current position, Scott served as Arlington's Park District Supervisor, where he was responsible for 38 parks and a $1 million budget, and additionally worked for the town of Addison, Texas, and the city of Lufkin, Texas. Scott is both a certified playground safety inspector and a certified parks and recreation professional through the NRPA, and is a licensed irrigator, backflow tester, and pesticide applicator. Scott, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dick. It's a pleasure to be here today to speak with you.
As a sales engineer with Cartograph, Todd Henderson channels his asset and operation management expertise to help high-performance governments become more effective, efficient, and productive for their citizens. Prior to Cartograph, Todd served in the public sector for 7 years as a municipal utilities resource coordinator for the town of Marana, Arizona. So now, Todd, please begin.
Thank you so much, Dick, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. And with us, of course, as you've heard already, is Scott DeGrant, and he has just done a fantastic job using our software in especially the mobile application to really bring his city on board and really push the technology forward. He and his staff there at the City of Arlington have just done a fantastic job with our technology, and they're very expert users at it and have learned a lot of really great lessons that you're going to hear on this webinar today. Scott and his team there have really pushed the technology forward, and they've learned some great lessons along the way. And I know I have been on site there at the City of Arlington and seen their system at work, and it is impressive. So, Scott, I just want to thank you for being such a great client, you and the City of Arlington. And yeah, I'm excited about this webinar today because I know you've learned some great lessons that are really going to be a tremendous benefit to all of the listeners today. So with that, go ahead and take it away, and thanks again for joining us, Scott, and thanks for doing such a great job there in the City of Arlington.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate that introduction. You're very kind. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today I'm going to take you down the path, if you will, of the FEMA reporting based on an experience we had based on a flood event back in May of 2015. And as Todd mentioned, we've really done a lot of trial and error and tried to get our process down as professionally and efficient as we can. And today I'd like to share some of those lessons that we've learned, things we can do better, and also some goals and things and successes that we've accomplished using the Cartograph software. So we'll go ahead and begin our presentation. To give you a little background information, back in May of 2015, we had a real big flood event. Basically, it rained the whole month of May. And as a result, as you can see here, typically May is our wettest month of the year. We get most of our rainfall in May here in Texas. But that particular year, we had over 18 inches of rain a couple of years ago, and over 9 inches of rain fell in the last 7 days. So as you can well believe, the ground was already real saturated, and that last week really pushed us over the edge and caused a lot of flooding in our city parks. We had about 27 parks out of our 90 total that had flood-related incidents and damages. As you can see on the map here on the left, the parks in red had over $1,000 in damages based on that one particular flood event in May of 2015. For example, the biggest impact we had was along the Trinity River, which kind of runs along the north part of the Arlington border here at 360 and Interstate 30 in the north part of Arlington. It had over $18,000 in damages alone. It's about a 1,400-acre park. Again, it runs along the river corridor, so as you can imagine, the damage here on the left with the trails flooding and debris, silt removal and things, it was really, we had our hands full trying to clean up after all that flood event. Which brings us to our Cartograph software. And for those of you who don't know, our Cartograph is a work and asset management software. The City of Arlington Parks have been using this software since 2014. I've been with the project since day one, and we have 4 staff who currently work on the Cartograph project as well as other asset management activities. We help maintain the program, keep the users trained, update the software, and run reports and do all kinds of analytics and research on all the information that Cartograph provides us. Our asset management team includes my manager, Dan Withers, myself, our asset system analyst, which is Larry Miglitz, and our inventory coordinator, which is Adrian Rodriguez. Next screen you see here in front of you is a screenshot of the actual Cartograph software, and I'll zoom in just a little bit so you can see the details there. This is, like I said, a static screenshot. It's got all of our tasks in there. It's got a mapping ability. The management software allows us to track assets, activities, labor, equipment, and materials. It also has the ability to do a GIS map integration and is very compatible with Excel importing and exporting information. And that's going to play a key role in helping us build our case for the FEMA reimbursement, as I'll show you in this next slide. So before the flood event, we've been working with Cartograph about a year and a half, building the system. We slowly integrated users, 2 and then 4 and 6 and then multipliers after that. And as we did that, we put all the employee information in Cartograph, things such as name, our payroll Chronos ID, labor rates, which include a standard rate and overtime rate. And the standard rate in our model is an average hourly benefit based on position, which includes benefits. So all of our T6 level employees make the same amount in Cartograph. There's no individual pay rates in the system. We found that to be particularly easier to manage because pay rates change all the time, and we didn't want other people kind of looking in and seeing what other folks make within the system. And of course we have our overtime rate, which is the standard rate times 1.5. Now that takes us to our equipment table. In Cartograph, we loaded up all our equipment, the ID numbers, descriptions, photos are very important, and also rates for equipment. And on a side note here, our standard rate of equipment in Cartograph is 0, and that's because our cost of equipment is accounted for somewhere else. So we did not put that in the Cartograph system as a standard rate. However, we do have a FEMA rate for all equipment, and that's used only in case of FEMA events. So if we have another catastrophe such as a flood, a tornado, or a windstorm, we communicate with our staff to use the FEMA rate on our equipment. And the FEMA rates, we got those by researching the FEMA website, and they just updated those. We found those on their site, downloaded it, and then imported the rates into Cartograph. With my experience, those change every couple of years. We try to keep on top of that and keep looking back at that website for updates. And at the top right corner here, you'll see I got a little tip here to use Excel to import information. And that's a huge time saver for everyone out there. We had a lot of our information already in Excel, which a lot of cities do that. We worked off Excel for many, many years. I've been here since 2002, and we keep all our information there, and those sheets were saved in a lot of different places. Well, when I built the software, I incorporated all that together and imported into Cartograph as one holding space for all of that information. So in Cartograph, you're allowed to use activities, and we try to keep it simple for our flood and storm damage activities. We have over 52 activities in Cartograph. I didn't want to show all those to you today, but the only 3 we have related to storm incidents are the ones you see on the screen, which are flood cleanup, storm damage, and ice and snow removal. And yes, once every blue moon, we do have an ice event here that requires tasks and activities for that. It happens once in a while here, but we do have those occasionally. Now over on the asset side, in Arlington Parks, we have over 100 types of assets. Those things include things like parks, municipal grounds, which are things such as libraries, police stations, city buildings, administrative buildings. Our assets go all the way down to the granular level for things like benches, trash cans, pet waste stations, picnic tables, and things like that. But the thing to keep in mind is when we're doing activities and tasks for items, we try to think broad. And what I mean by that is we don't track costs for all of our small furnishings like our drinking fountains. We only track costs against about 30 of the 100 asset types. And in this flood incident I'll talk about in just a few more minutes, we charge those assets like parks and keep it at a big level. So we didn't get too granular in the accounting and the cost totals that we were looking at. And again, try to keep it simple. Limit your activities. Choose your large assets is a big tip I'd give you here. Because you can get real crazy. There's a fine line to walk between number of activities and number of asset types. And so we think we have a pretty good balance right now, but this all really depends on your city and your size and the scope of work that your department does. So on the next slide is a screenshot of the iPad app that we use. It's called the Cartographer iPad app. And in the field, our staff input their hours, equipment, and other costs into the iPad. It's got their task list over on the left. It's got a mapping system over on the right. You can sort by date, proximity, and priority. So in the field, our staff get tasks. They can also create their own. And essentially, they log all of their hours and everything into a task. And it rolls up into the big ticket items, which I'll show you in just a couple of seconds. But the real efficiency of using Cartograph is their field iPad, which can send tasks to the field instantaneously. It's updated real time. You can refresh it. You can look for other assets. You can look for tasks nearby. So if we have staff at a park and there's another task nearby, they can see that on the map and go over there and do the task. And again, I'll touch a little bit more on the task details. So task entails of things like labor hours, equipment hours, materials, and other costs. And that all rolls into the task, which includes things like start and stop dates, description, and attachments. And attachments in this example for the flood were critical, and I'll go into that in just a few more minutes. So as all the tasks in the field are created, they all roll into what we call a work order. And a work order is essentially a bucket of all these tasks. It rolls up all the costs, information, the number of labor hours for a particular event. We also use this for other examples, such as special events and impacts on the events we have in the city, like cleaning up around the Cowboy Stadium here in Arlington, or preparing for a downtown event such as the 4th of July. We roll those all into a work order, and that way, year after year, we can compare all the totals for each of those events against last year's work order. On the next slide here, it shows us what we call a work order report. And essentially, like I said, all the information from all those tasks roll into one big report, and these are customizable reports from Cartograph. And our asset system analyst, Larry Miglitz, has done an outstanding job creating these and customizing them for our needs. You can do this with color and headers. You can remove different things. You can add fields, tasks, and notes. But this report you see on the right, I'll zoom in a little bit, and you can see that this particular flood event in the May of 2015 calendar year resulted in a total of $39,000 in impact for just that one event. This particular work order is completed. We have 55 tasks within that work order. You can see our labor costs, equipment, that's based on the FEMA rate, no materials used, but the other cost was over $11,000. And a lot of that other costs were things like landfill charges, debris removal, and things that we had to pay contractors to do and come in and help us clean up. So in the report template that we have here that Larry created, we have columns like task ID, the activity, and all the assets here, priority status, and the total cost. And you can manage these and customize these as you need to include things like labor hours or description, notes, and things of that nature. You can customize that however you like. Now, on the heels of the work order report, we also have what we call a labor report. And this was a great document for us to submit to FEMA. And I think the biggest takeaway from this project, the success we had, was we had all this employee information already populated. So when the event came, we were ready to go and pull the trigger. We had these reports set up. We could query labor, hours, rates, and all that stuff basically in the reporting form. This particular report you see here on the right is a crew for the Belmaris crew. The particular employee, excuse me, is Armando Belmaris. His ID number, all the dates that he worked on each task, and the hours for each task. The column in blue is your task ID column, activity, and of course the asset. As you can tell, Armando did a lot of work at River Legacy Park. That's kind of his main park in the north side of Arlington. Down below, you can see other assets that we did work against for this event. The Living Science Center, Pavilion, we had a playground asset, and others that we did a lot of work. Like I said, 27 sites were impacted by this particular flood event. Another great component and really an efficient tool for Cartograph is the ability to import-export data using Excel. And so what we did here in this example was export all that labor cost and labor hours into Excel, and that allows you to create pie charts, bar charts, pivot tables. You can slice and dice that information any way you want. And so this is a pie chart I created using our new Office 365 software. With most of the parks that had flood impacts, I didn't include all 27, but we have about 10 there, and then the others are in the very bottom at the 6 o'clock position for a total of $3,905. But visually, you can really tell that River Legacy Park had the lion's share of the work up there. Almost 50% of that total 39,000 was at River Legacy. And of course, we had other sites, the MLK Sports Center, Robert Cluckin, Richard Green Park, Fish Creek, Bowman Springs, and so forth. So that export really allows you to even modify it even further to fit your needs and visually display the data and the cost based on the event. So what happens next? If an event does occur, and we have several here that happen once or twice a year sometimes. We're in the middle of tornado season. We just had a lot of rain, which is kind of ironic because I'm doing this webinar today. But the last week we had 2 or 3 inches of rain. It was nothing near that year when we had this event, but if an event does occur, the first thing we do in the Cartograph team, our asset management side, is create a work order. And we have an owner assigned to that. We have details. The next step is we communicate that to our staff. And we reach out to all of our employees that use Cartograph and tell them, add all your tasks for flood cleanup to this particular work order. And Cartograph allows us to rename a work order. It auto-populates the next numerical number, but we can rename it. So we can call this flood of 2017 or tornado of 2018 or whatever the case. We communicate, we communicate that to our staff, who therefore create tasks in the field for flood cleanup, storm damage, etc. And then at the end of the day, we also explain to them to communicate to use FEMA rate for that equipment, and I touched on that on an earlier slide. That's kind of a critical part of this cost appraisal for any kind of work order, is making sure that we get the right rates in there. So we try to communicate that out clearly to our staff. And sometimes, even though we communicate to staff, some of the tasks don't get attached to work orders. So we go through daily and kind of look for search and keywords that maybe they missed a task that was not attached to work order, and we'll go ahead and attach that internally. So as administrators, we can do that from our desktop version and put those tasks in there that belong inside the correct work order. Also, a couple of good takeaways here. If an event does occur, keep all invoices and attach those to a task. So the Cartograph app allows us to scan. We can attach a photo, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, anything electronic. We can attach that to a task or a work order. So when we had this event in May, we communicated to all of our staff, They scanned the invoices, and we had them all in one holding spot. So we didn't have to reach out and say, Jay, can you send us these invoices, or Martin, can you send us these? They were all just incorporated into the task or the work order in one holding spot. One of the things that FEMA kind of pinged us on was record quantity of debris removed. This was a big one that we weren't really anticipating. Again, this was the first FEMA submittal that we had in parks. So it was kind of our first blast through the door. And of course, their suggestions, they come back and say we need more information on this item or that item. But they seemed really interested in the quantity of debris removed. So things like silt or vegetation, landscaping, plants, trees, they actually wanted to know what types of debris were removed and their final destination. So some of the things that we removed, for example, silt, they wanted to know if that went to a landfill or if it went for landscaping or if it was just chipped up and pushed to the side of the creek. I thought that peculiar that they want to know where the stuff ended up. So that was one thing we learned from this exercise. Again, pictures, I can't stress enough. Photos, they tell 1,000 words. So all the photos and tasks of the impact are in there. They're in one holding spot for perpetuity. We can always look back and see the impact for the flooding that happened in that particular event. Like I said, our administrative staff, we monitor our tasks daily. Not every day, but for events that we put in work orders, such as a flood event or a catastrophe or things like that, a special event, we monitor those, look for keywords, and try to group them into the task. We look for typos. We don't catch everything, but we try to look for, too many hours on one task or wrong equipment or equipment not entered. We kind of glaze through those about once a day to make sure all the tasks are accounted for correctly. And lastly, make sure payroll matches your cartograph records. And that kind of goes back to the task labor report that I mentioned a few minutes ago. That was something that FEMA came back and looked at our payroll and cartograph, and they said, you say this guy works 7 hours here, but he only has 5 in his payroll. And that was a typo that we just missed. And when we're human, we can't catch all the errors. We really try to do our best to make sure the information is accurate and entered as efficiently as possible. So here we have a thumbs up and a thumbs down of our lessons learned. Up front, our employee info and our equipment information that we had in there, I think that was key. That really saved us a lot of headache later on. The reporting device and the engine that we developed from our report templates for work orders and task labor, in a moment's notice, we could just hit a few buttons, print that, scan it, email it, send it over. That really helped us save a lot of time on the front end. Like I said, the reporting function, completely customizable. And the invoices, I think we did a great job capturing all the invoices. However, on the back end, there was a couple of things on the invoices that didn't quite match the entries in cartograph. And I will give it to the federal government. They really kind of went through this with a fine-tooth comb and found discrepancies. And to me, it was a great moment because I didn't think the government really looked really closely at all the costs that come through. But I was surprised that they caught a couple of those clerical errors that we did not see up front. On the thumbs down, I think we could have done a little better job with our detailed descriptions on tasks. That was one thing that FEMA came back and wanted us to elaborate more on tasks. So if a task was entered and it had no notes in the box, we had to go back and backfill on exactly what the staff did on that particular task. Like I said, double check your invoices and amounts. I mentioned earlier, track the quantities of debris removed, whether it's silt, vegetation. They want to know cubic yards of that was removed from the site. And lastly, reconcile payroll versus your cartograph records. That was, again, it's human error. We don't catch all typos and things, but that was something that they kind of dinged us on when they came back and wanted more information on that. So, but there you have it, folks. That's our presentation for sustainable approach to FEMA reporting. And if I could, I'll jump over just a second and show you. This is the Cartograph actual desktop app we have here. For this particular work order, we have our basic information, a description of the event, the owner, the start dates, the entry dates. All 55 tasks are on the map here, as you can see in front of you. Within the city of Arlington, kind of right there in the middle between Dallas and Fort Worth. If I go down a little further, we'll see a list of all the tasks, labor hours, total costs, the labor count. We had 44 staff that are engaged in this particular flood event that worked a total of 1,283 hours at a labor cost of $26,774. As you can see, our employee information set up with photos, ID numbers, everything is all encompassed in detail, already built in the cartograph. This is another snapshot of our labor log. As you can see, the rows and columns are exportable to Excel to make the pie charts and graphs if you need to. And lastly, our equipment. We used a total of 46 pieces of equipment, totaling $722 on 52 of those 55 tasks. We have things as small as a weed eater up to a tractor, truck, trailer, a Ford F-350 one-ton vehicle there. And again, you can see all the pictures we have here, so we know exactly what piece of equipment that was used on any task for that matter. And all the logs, these are all the logs that equipment was used on and the task ID number that matches the task above here. We'll get down to the other cost here, which is really the kind of the big ticket item. You can see the total was $11,500. So we had companies like Able Trucking, Arbor Master did a lot of our tree removal. These are contractors for a total cost of $1,430. Remodeling construction, we had a rental company rent tractors. Republic Services is our landfill provider, so we spent about $600 with them. Sunbelt Rentals, excuse me, Wiz Keystone and things like that to help clean up this particular flood event. Here's a log of all of those invoices. Then lastly, at the very bottom, you can see all of our invoices are attached here as files. So we can open any invoice at any time and take a look at exactly what we rented, how much. We've got the MLK trail repairs and notes here that someone has written in. Did a great job accounting for that. So when FEMA came back and wanted these invoices, we could print any of them in a moment's notice here. And the way our cartograph system is set up is any user can import or add attachments, but we can limit by permissions who can delete, remove, or update anything in the system. So we have it set to where some of our users cannot delete data, and that's by design, so these invoices don't get dropped off any of our work orders or tasks in the system. So I just want to kind of give you a brief overview of what the desktop kind of version looks like in action there. And with that, I'll turn it over to any questions that the audience may have at this point.
Todd and Scott, thank you for an outstanding presentation. We do have some questions coming in, so let's get right to them. Of the money requested, how much did the city of Arlington receive from FEMA?
That is a great question. So the way this process was handled is all departments submitted information. We have a FEMA coordinator with the city. He pushes it over to them, and the check goes back into the general fund. So I don't actually see exactly how much we get back. But by consulting with our FEMA director over there, from this particular event, we attained and we got back about 40% of the total cost that we submitted for. And the next question you're probably going to ask is, why didn't they fund the rest of it? And I don't honestly know the answer to that. It was just submitted to them. We didn't get any more clarification needed on our task after that point, so I don't think they needed any more information. It could have been limited funds or any other variables there. I'm just not sure. But to answer your question, we attained about 40% of that $39,000 back to the city.
All right, next question. How many iPads do you have deployed in the field?
Okay, currently we have over 50 iPads in the field. The iPads are assigned to crew leaders. So the crew leader is responsible for the 3 or 4 staff under his crew, and he enters all their labor hours and things like that. We have some that are, some iPads are assigned to our supervisors. However, you'll find a lot of managers and supervisors like to use the desktop version more. It's got more activity, it's a little bit more robust, and horsepower to kind of get those fine-tuned details. But to answer your question, we have about 50 iPads out there in the hands of the staff, and we manage those with a data plan from AT&T. They have software built in if they're lost or stolen. And so we found this to be a great benefit to put that iPad in their hands as kind of an electronic to-do list. And once they're complete those tasks, they disappear off their list and they move on to the next one. But we have, like I said, we have over 50 out in the field as of today.
All right, next question. How long did it take to set up the employee and equipment information?
Well, that was a lengthy process, and it really helped me a lot because we had a lot of those tables and charts already developed. So my job was to clean up any kind of typos or equipment. To answer your question, it took a few months. After sorting through all of the equipment and the labor records, the employee information, getting all that set up for the import, it takes several weeks sometimes. I was assigned this project solo, so that's all I did for a few months was gather that information, put it all in a format that we could import it straight into Cartograph. And if there's one takeaway from this, that import-export is a huge time saver. If you have massive quantities of data, package that up into Excel and you can import it right into the system. So I just kind of information gathering for a week or two, and then cleaning it up and then importing in later. So it was several weeks to get all that in there.
All right, next question. Do you already use another work order system for work orders in normal operations?
We do. We use Cartograph for all of our operations, and this particular flood event was just one small example. Like I said, we rolled this out in 2014, and you can see our task list here. We have things like litter abatement, a little flood cleanup over last weekend, but we have about 100 staff on Cartograph that log their hours, and that includes our park operations group, our aquatics group, our field maintenance group, our asset management staff, and people like that, and they track and put all their tasks in here. Since 2014, we've had over 120,000 tasks, so the system has just grown exponentially. It's huge. We have enormous amounts of data in there. In our asset side, we have about 11,000 total assets, and probably 8,000 to 9,000 of those are trees. So we had a lot of trees that we had already in the GIS format we imported into Cartograph, which, like I said, was a huge time saver. But to answer your question, we use Cartograph to track all of our park operations activities and special events and things of that nature.
Next question, kind of a comment in a question. Labor rates actual or average for employees? Earlier you said enter one rate, but that doesn't seem to follow with labor report data. Can you clarify that for us?
Yes. Maybe I can jump back to that slide real quick. Okay. So this is our labor report for a particular employee for that event. And we, as you can see, Armando on Monday the 25th worked 7.25 overtime rate. These blanks are the standard rates. So any blank is just his normal rate, and that's an average, like I said, an average rate with benefits. So Armando happens to be at T6 level, so all T6 level employees make the same rate in Cartograph. And then when Armando enters these tasks, he chooses a rate depending on if he's worked over 40 hours. In this case, he'll choose the overtime rate to put on that particular task. So on this Sunday, May 31st, he had already worked 40, and he worked 3.5 on the 30th overtime and another 3 on the 31st on that particular task right there. So I hope that kind of clarifies the question.
Next question. Did you open up tasks daily, or did you open up, for example, one task for each foreman for 1 month period and have them switch the timesheet to the current date?
Well, at this point when this event happened, our groups were really fluid and good, and they were already kind of trained in how to create the tasks, input the data. So we didn't create tasks and send them out. We just let the employees create tasks on their own. So they're required to do this every day as part of their job. So this particular event this week, as you can see, a lot of Armando's work was flood cleanup. He did have some special events and pavilion rentals that he worked on later in June. But, you know, they track all their work. They create their own tasks. And if it was a flood cleanup task like this one here, we encourage our guys to leave that task open until all of that work scope is completed. So as you can see, this 34240 task was open for several weeks. It was open from the 25th till at least June the 11th. So when they log into their iPad, they can go to that task. Instead of creating a new task every day, we allow them to piggyback their labor on that existing task for that particular activity.
Next question, do you use any numbering convention for your labor tasks and asset IDs?
That's a great question, and it's a simple answer, really. Our task IDs populate numerically based on the last task that was created. So if I create a new task today, it'll be just the next number in line. So, it would be 34241 or 242, et cetera. Cartograph names them automatically as they are created. Same with the work orders. However, you have the ability to rename a task or a work order if you like. For our equipment, the ID number, it also auto-populates, but we change that over to the actual equipment ID number instead, because that makes more sense to us. So if we have truck number 3057, we put that as the ID number. Even though Cartograph populates it with the next available number, we want it to be our own unique number, so it allows us to customize that as we need to. And that's the same with really any ID number in the system.
Next question is, how long did the process take from start to finish?
Well, that's a loaded question. The process to build Cartograph is ongoing. I started the assignment in September of 13, rolled it out in 14. So for several months, we were building the data, putting information in there before we actually roll it out live. Now the process for this particular work order started in, looks like the week of May 25th, and it lingered on for over a month. So we had different things that kept piling onto that work order, and once we felt confident that all the activities were completed for that particular flood event, then we would close the task and then complete the work order, and then we have our rounded up numbers and totals for that particular event. I'll jump back to the slide and kind of show you a little better look at that. Right there. So these are all the tasks incorporated within the flood work order for May of 15. So we have, this is only one page of probably 5 that we have, which lists all the activities here and the costs and things of that nature.
Okay. Next question. By giving everyone the same labor rate in Cartograph, does that skew your total costs?
That's a great question. I never really thought about that. We could, based on a labor report, we could export it and put their actual labor rates in there if we wanted to. And I'm surprised FEMA didn't ask us for that, but they didn't. It would be really simple to do. It'd just be some moving around of different rates for individuals. But we felt like it's pretty close. It's really close as we could get based on all particular employees in a particular job title. They all make pretty close to the same, so the numbers don't vary a whole lot. But we feel like we're within ballpark range of using that average labor rate. And we look at that each year after our benefits are calculated and added. So some employees may add or drop insurance. And so we update that about once a year. If we get pay raises, we update it then too, most certainly. But we try to keep it as accurate as we can within the ballpark. So.
Okay. Next question. I'm sure everybody wants to know, what's the cost of the software, and is there a monthly cost and a limited number of users?
Okay, I think I'm going to yield that question to Todd Henderson, if Todd's available on the line.
Yeah, and I'm not a salesperson, so I can't. It does vary according to the needs, the number of assets you want to capture, what services you want, things like that. But basically, it is a cost and then a yearly maintenance fee. I would encourage you to reach out to the email events@cartograph.com. And we'll get you in touch with someone who will be able to address those needs very specifically to you and your organization.
Once again, that's cartograph.com, you said, Todd?
Yeah, events@cartograph.com.
Events@cartograph.com, okay?
Yes, and we'll route that to the proper personnel.
Okay, excellent. Next question. Can you drill down to a specific asset such as a battlefield or playground, or are your assets just the park location?
That's a great question. I'm glad I've got the software pulled up because I can show you the answer is both. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation that we have large assets such as a park. We have a lot smaller ones like light poles or irrigation, for example, and things like that. But yes, you can drill down to all the details of any particular asset based on attributes that you set up. So for example, a park asset will have things like council districts, number of acres. Is it a neighborhood park? There's a picture of Vandergrift Park here. Total cost to date since we've been on Cartograph is in this corner on the right. These are the fields I spoke of here. It's in the South Maintenance District, Paul Brannon's, the Crew, development class districts, things of that nature. So these are all the attributes of a park asset. And those are, like I said, those are customizable by the user. And we spend a lot of time putting focus and thought into what those would be. In addition, your smaller assets, like an irrigation system, for example, will have a different set of attributes because that's a different type of asset. But some of them are similar. We have a division of forestry, the manufacturer, does it have a master valve, a rain sensor, etc. Any inspections there. So that's just a couple of small examples. Now, Cartograph will allow you to share assets under one another, and it's a really great feature that we utilize a lot. So for example, a park may have a parking lot. It may have 10 or 12 assets that are shared under the park. All the costs of those assets roll up into the park asset itself. And on the components tab here, it might take a minute to load because we have a lot of stuff shared. But if there are things like I said, a parking lot, a restroom, a pavilion, anything that's shared under a park asset are kind of children of the parent asset, and you set that sharing up, as the end user, you do that yourself. So we'll look over here at the tree, and the sharing part in Arlington is still an ongoing process. We feel like we're about 9% completed there. Our first step was to try to get all the assets in the system. We used that with a massive field group exercise where all the staff went out and added assets, created everything we have. And there's still a few things we miss now and then, new assets that are brought on board or retired, things like that that we may have missed on the initial asset grab. But our sharing was the second part of that. So we share things like playgrounds and parking lots and irrigation stuff under a particular park. And I apologize, it's taken a long time to load, but our parks have, like I said, a lot of things shared under them. The system's trying to search through and figure out what all is in this particular park. So it'll take just a minute, but while that's loading, we can, well, there we go. Okay, so we have a bench, we have flat work, electric systems. Under electric systems, we have all these controllers such as time clocks. We have fencing, we have gates, horseshoe court, which also has fencing underneath that asset. The irrigation, we have 4 irrigation systems in Vandergrift Park. Numerous light poles. Man, we have probably 1,000 light poles or more in the city of Arlington. Parking lots, picnic tables. We have probably 700 total in the city. The playground is a big one. We have 50 some odd, give or take, playground. Each playground has components like fencing, play equipment, shade structure, the surfacing, whether it's a rubber poured in place or engineered wood fiber, things like that. Skate park asset in Vandergrift Park as well, tennis courts, you know, the list goes on, but and hundreds of trash cans, as you can see, and then the numerous trees also. So I hope I answered your question. That kind of gives you an overall 50,000-foot view of the ability of assets and the sharing and the granularity that comes with that.
Okay, next question. Do you use Cartograph for your building facility work orders?
No, we do not. Our Parks Cartograph OMS is exclusive to Parks and Rec. In the City of Arlington, our Public Works and Water Department have the OMS software as well, but we don't use that for any facility maintenance per se. Now, we do have employees that work in facilities such as rec centers, and they do use Cartograph. So they're operations employees that do work in only parks and recreation facilities, such as aquatic centers, swimming pool areas, rec centers, concessions, rental centers, and things like that. So we use a small component of that for facility maintenance, but it's less than probably 2% of our total aggregate of the tasks that we do.
All right. When adding new assets, do you create them through Cartograph, GIS integration, or both? Well,
our model is designed where we create them through Cartograph, and we're allowed to do that. We have the ability to do that in the field with the iPad and on the desktop. And so a lot of the assets at the desktop we can add from here. For example, I can create this parking lot and draw it in, measure it, put the square footage in from the desktop. And on the iPad, we had that in the hands of the users in the field, and they created, you know, benches, trash cans, light poles. We did this for several weeks, and then we turned off the permissions for the staff to do that because we wanted to be able to kind of sort through the data, look for inaccuracies or typos, and kind of do some cleanup there. So we really limit our asset collection. However, our asset management team is always adding and creating assets either with the iPad or the desktop, and now we've used the Cartograph One app a little bit, which will do the same functions as the Cartograph for iPad app. Cartograph One app is an app you can use on any cell phone device, whether it be an Android or iPad or iPhone. But the Cartograph for iPad app is only on the iPads. So we've used that extensively at the desktop and in the field numerous times.
All right. Have you or can you perform a condition assessment on your park assets within Cartograph?
Absolutely. And we have done that on a small scale with our playground. Now, for those folks in the Parks and Rec industry, this is different from a playground inspection. Playground inspection is we do those monthly. That's a different format. But in Cartograph, we can do a condition assessment based on the quality, the age, the aesthetics, the structure, things like that of any asset. And so that's on our horizon to expand that condition asset, which is a great example of the powerful use of Cartograph, is that in the old system, we did it all through Excel. We had a team of 10 people that went out, and we did a third of the city every 2 years. Well, now that we have Cartograph, we can do all of our assets basically in less than 1 year. And that's a huge, and it rolls all the data up with a scoring system that you set up. So you can say that, you know, structure or safety is a 10-point weight, but aesthetics is maybe a 5-point, and then it does the math for you. But that condition assessment is a really powerful tool that we plan on engaging in the future using the Cartograph system. And that inspections can be done in the field with the iPad as well. And we've done that a little bit on our playgrounds, but we haven't explored all the horsepower that will do quite yet. We're just kind of on the tip of the iceberg there.
Okay, our next question we kind of go together here. How much does Arlington, and are you willing to share this information? How much does Arlington pay for this product? Initial fee, monthly costs, etc. They're wondering about what the city budget for this is.
Well, that's a good question. That's kind of above my pay grade. I don't purchase the software or do anything with the billing or payments. I will tell you that we chose to do the cloud-based data sharing. And so Cartograph provides us with what they call the cloud. All of our data is saved in the cloud. We pay for that. And looking back, that was a great move because we had no one in IT was involved in this other than just the initial iPad purchases. So we did not have to buy a server. All our information is stored in the cloud. We pay Cartograph once a year, and our data, we own that. And so that's a great way to kind of bypass the whole server storage kind of idea. And like Todd said, the sales consultant or someone at Cartograph can go through all those details with you. But as far as specifics on what we pay, I know Parks pays about 40% of the cost of the city of Arlington because we have two other departments that use the system. Like I said, Public Works and Water. We all group that together and we pay one bill. But a bottom line total, I am not sure the answer to that question.
Thanks, Scott. That's the last question we have up on the screen. If more come up, you will have an opportunity to ask them later, and I'll mention that in a minute. But Todd, is there anything you would like to add? We do have a little bit of time left, and I just wondered if there's anything that you would like to add to the conversation.
Well, as Scott was going through this, one of the things I wanted to point out is, as far as the cloud-based system, if people are wondering, it is through Amazon Web Services. So as you know, that's very familiar with a lot of people. So the safety and security of the data is very robust with Amazon Web Services. When it comes to managing facilities with Cartograph, you certainly can do that. Just like Parks, we look at that as what we would call a container component relationship. So you've got the geographic footprint of, as you can see on the screen, Scott's Park there in Arlington. But you also have the ability to look at the geographic footprint of, say, a building. So within that geographic footprint, you have assets that you want to manage. You can do that through Cartograph, whether it's a building, a signalized intersection, a park, water plant, sewer plant. Just kind of think in those terms of that container component relationship, and you'll be able to conceptualize that and realize that not only are you able to manage the geographic footprint of the facility or park itself, but you also are managing everything that is subordinate to that within that geographic footprint. So if I'm in the park and I am doing an inspection on a bench, and then I'm going to go inspect some playground equipment, then I've got to go repair something else. All those costs are being rolled up to the park itself, so to the container. So with that, what you get is not only the ability to capture the labor, equipment, material, and other expenses contained within the one asset, but that also is rolling that up to the total of the park itself or the facility itself or whatever it is you're managing. So that container component relationship is very important from the standpoint of I'm able to drill down to an individual asset. You can see there, Scott has up on his screen, within that park, there's individual assets, but then there's also that geographic footprint that you're managing too. So I can kind of do cost comparisons of facility to facility, park to park, etc. Then that helps me make decisions on the overall condition of the park itself, the facilities themselves. So didn't mean to belabor the point, but suffice it to say, it gives you the ability to manage a lot of different assets in that container component relationship if you have a geographic footprint with assets within that you want to capture within that geographic footprint, as well as networks. So it's water and sewer network. You'll be able to see all those on the screen and manage those accordingly.
Okay, well, it looks like we've run out of questions, but if you come up with a question and a particular question that you didn't get in, please let us know in a brief survey that will pop up following the webcast. And if you would like additional information on how your organization can become a more effective, efficient, and productive high-performance government, please visit cartograph.com. Scott and Todd, once again, I'd like to thank you for an excellent presentation, and thanks again to Cartograph for making this webinar possible. Okay, that'll do it. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.